Hey everybody, welcome to another wonderful episode. I'm here with my good friend Bob Bonniol from Mode Studios. This is the third session from Ahead of the Curve, and Ahead of the Curve is a company that I founded to try and educate and bring some really engaging and interesting topics and conversations to all of you, our audience, to engage, to basically come together as a community and hopefully learn about some of the things that are happening in our world today. Also learn about some of the different technologies that might be presently here or stuff that's going to be available as we move on. So I'd like to introduce Bob. Bob, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm doing fine. I'm healthy. The sun is out here in Seattle. The blue sky does not know about coronavirus. The birds in my yard do not know about coronavirus. So it was an excellent reminder to me this morning that as much as I might be in this incredibly weird headspace, the world is continuing. So
yeah, actually, I think from a natural point of view and a nature point of view, it's actually getting healthier.
Yes.
That's not being present and engaging everywhere.
Absolutely.
So Bob, would you mind giving us just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, where you started, how you came to be?
Well, I don't know what I do now, but 5 weeks ago, I've been a creative director and production designer in my practice of late, let's say the last 5 years. I'm the chief creative officer for Mode Studios, which is an amazing collection of architects, designers, programmers, interactive artists who I get to work with every day, which is an amazing privilege. And Mode has worked for a long time in the worlds of entertainment, brand activation, and architectural installation. And in terms of entertainment, we most often are found working with large institutional entertainment providers, people like Disney or the broadcast networks, or working with Live Nation or AEG. And in brand activation, we have a big practice in the automotive sector and in the tech sector at doing big conferences and product reveals, things like that. And then in our architectural installation work, we focus a lot in media-driven, interactively driven installations that are commonly found in, say, big brand atriums or retail spaces. So, and that grew out of a career that began in 1987 when I wandered into Trinity Repertory Company in Providence, Rhode Island, and met my wife, who was the head electrician at Trinity at the time, who gave me my first job in the theater and has more or less been my boss ever since. And then I worked my way up from being an electrician to a production electrician to a programmer to a moving light programmer to eventually a lighting designer, which was an interesting leap in and of itself because I was coming up through theater where it was more uncommon.
I think you and I have the same roots there quite a bit, actually. That's where I started as well.
I think in that world, it's also uncommon to make the jump from the trenches to the design level. I think in concerts, that's how it happens. You work your way up from hanging lights to running them and designing them. But in theater, there was an interesting divide where the designers were highly educated. They had master's degrees in what they were doing, and I didn't. But I made that jump nevertheless. And along the line, I've also been a professor at Cal Arts in video for live performance in the MFA program there. And Colleen and I started Mode Studios in 1997. So we are a 22-year overnight success.
That's awesome. It's a great way to kind of bring it up and evolve into where you are now. So I really wanted to kind of just dive right in onto what we're talking about today and get your thoughts as to how you feel or where you feel we are currently inside of our industry as a whole. And touch on some of the subjects about what people could be looking at, what people could be working on, how people are working right now inside of our industry.
Well, how long have we got?
We're gonna have to make it pretty brief.
Yeah, and that's okay, because here's the certain thing in all of this uncertainty, and that is that what we know today is going to be different next week, and it's going to be very different next month. And so I'd like to start with a little hope around that, because right now it could seem pretty bleak. We've all been at full stop. Most of us have been at full stop for at least a month, which I think is an incredible thing to try to encompass if you're working as an independent agent, as a freelancer in the entertainment or the events industry, or you've got a small business. This is the kind of challenge that can be a real survival situation that really can define how you operate as a business person. And it's funny, Colleen and I have been in moments of levity. We've said, well, this is our third apocalypse now, because we took the business through 9/11, which was similar in terms of there being a giant shock to the system, and then a recovery from that. We've survived the recession of 2008, 2009, and now we're doing this. And I think that the things we learned from previous episodes of this is the value of being able to get really lean and stay really lean to survive. And then to be able, in particular in 2008 and 2009, we learned this. And that's just an idea of how can we think differently? We are, as business people, as creatives, as freelancers, we are problem solvers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in our industry, that's one of the main things that we do, right? Is we solve problems on a daily basis. We've probably got some of the best problem solvers in the world available in our community, at least the ones that can think very quickly on their feet.
Well, that's exactly the case. And really, that's kind of an antecedent that we're all supposed to have to meet this demand that we all know of, which is the show must go on. So in the spirit of the show must go on, the question now for people like us is, we still have clients who have needs, and now they're living in a place of incredible uncertainty. So the core message that I have right now about where we're at right now is, how can we help our clients right now? How can we be with our clients in this time of uncertainty? Clients who still want to and need to communicate, entertain, inspire, educate, they still need to do those things. Now, we had a way we used to do those things 5 weeks ago and beyond, but now there's a new way. I think in the near future there will be yet another new way, and then I think it gradiates from there. So right now, how we're operating in the relationships with our clients is to try to discuss with them and strategize with them. Okay, how can you continue to educate, inspire, entertain, and communicate right now? What that looks like right now is everybody still has to remain in place. So for us, we're having conversations about, okay, how might we bring the same production values you're used to this new circumstance and situation? So we've been talking with our vendors, for instance, about how to create little kits, little production kits that we can send to our brand activation and our corporate clients, so that they can still continue to from jumping on a Zoom call to maybe doing something a little more advanced with some virtual sets. How might they still appear, via live streams at this point, but still with production values, still with exciting content, still able to do things inspiring and be able to reach their audiences. And at the same time, it's a little more difficult in the entertainment side of the industry, because there's kind of a deeper conversation you can have about, well, how does storytelling and communal experience of story or song shift in a time when we have to be distributed? I think we see people responding to that, like our musician clients, they're in their living rooms giving concerts, and they're trying to meet those people. But I think the conversations we're having with those kind of clients at the moment are, what's it look like on the other side? And how are we going to get restarted? And when might we get restarted? And this is something that is very difficult to predict with the uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think that's where we have to look at different ways to basically move our ways forward currently. And Danny, hey Danny, being adaptive is key, absolutely. In the theme the the themed entertainment industry, there's no doubt about it. Hey Kyle, totally agree. Awesome. Yes, the show is always going to go on without a doubt. And that brings me to like talking about these virtual environments and virtual productions. We've been, as you know, my last two guests talked to Tupac and Berto. We spoke a lot about XR, extended reality, virtual reality, how these technologies kind of play into some of the things that we're looking at today. And, what are your feelings right now on this whole virtual production scene?
Well, I think we have to frame virtual production by acknowledging that there's a near-term version of that. Like the immediate version of that is for probably the next 3 to possibly 6 months, we are largely going to have to hold in place. So what virtual production looks like under those circumstances, we think is enabling our clients to have better production values where they are so that they can appear with a little bit more flash and compelling content and backdrops. And we also think that what's critical, look, what happens in an event, right? We all go experience something together, but then we interact with each other. We form a micro community around a purpose-driven situation. Absolutely. So one of the things that I hear a lot of my colleagues talking about right now as it relates to virtual events is the technical approach, which is great. You have to start somewhere. How might we get cameras in the hands of the clients? How might we remotely put together things that look cohesive and beautiful and are fun to watch? But the thing is, that's a one-way connection. That's like, how are we going to collect it and stream it? But what I don't see and hear a lot of people thinking about is how do we create the opportunity for community around that? So where we're focusing right now is, look, streaming stuff on the internet, that's 2012. Like that sorted. We know how to do that. What we know less about and what we have to develop expertise in now is how we wrap that with opportunities for interaction and for connection, for the audience to connect with each other, for the audience to connect with the presenters, the artists, the speakers, and for that to be a circuit. So we're putting a lot of emphasis in that now. And I think that's the near term, right? This distributed thing.
Yeah.
After that, I think we're going to get to a place where they're going to be able to test people for the antibodies. There's going to be a certain number of people who have had the virus and who are now able to participate again with some immunity. So basically, I think we're looking at a middle term thing where small groups are going to be able to get together again. And then I think
so I was speaking to another friend of mine here in Orlando, and he was mentioning that he thinks that raves will actually be like a big thing again. These small warehouse, like under the table, kind of bringing back the rave scene, where people are just going to come together no matter what.
Well, and I think that might
be a younger crowd.
I think that could happen. I think from a more, there's always that level of the entertainment industry, right? There's always the level that's going to do what it's going to do, that's not going to be denied, that's maybe going to be off of the sort of legal map of things. When I lived in Vegas, I did a lot of work in abandoned warehouses or just in the middle of the desert with a generator and a bunch of stuff to make stuff like that. And I think that's going to happen. In the meantime, you've got more institutional players like Live Nation, AED, those sort of companies that are going to be looking. I think when we get back to small gatherings, I'm not sure from a civic standpoint how small those will be. I think that there's probably going to be a range of time where it's maybe going to be okay for us to go back to the 10 to a dozen people gathered. And when that happens, what we're going to see is virtual production is going to start then encompassing things like what Berto and Tupac surely were talking about. At the point when you can get a small crew together on a merged reality stage, now virtual production takes a big jump in production values because you can start to do that. You can start to travel clients in small groups to a place where you have a small group of technicians, and suddenly you're able to make a live stream that's got a lot more production value and is a lot more interesting. And then on the other side of this, when there's a vaccine, we get to be social again. And at that point, that's when we're really going to be able to see and maybe predict a little bit better how fast and what it's going to look like in terms of the recovery. Because we also have to remember there's the recovery from this health crisis and just the logistics of getting together again. But there is a parallel economic crisis that's going on right now. And I don't want to be
it's a juggling act, right? You're balancing things on a very delicate scale.
Right. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about this, but the fact of the matter is that just stopping an economy like the United States economy for a period of 3 to 6 months, that's going to result in casualties in the businesses. There are going to be businesses that go out of business between now and the end of the summer. It's super unfortunate. It's entirely the case. Also, big source.
Well, I mean, just on the, I'm sorry for interrupting, but just on the whole, the mention of the lockdown, there were companies that were closing their doors within a week. I had a good friend of mine that owned a lighting company in Atlanta again, had been running for 17 years, and he had a whole bunch of events on the books to bring him through the year. And at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, they had all canceled. So he had to shut his doors.
Yeah, and that's just awful because those levels of companies are often the best. They have an individual focus on things. Those small to medium level companies are sometimes some of the best players in the market. The good news is that if you're a small business owner, you might be able to come through this and reorganize yourself and relaunch yourself on the other side of this because you're not going to have a cataclysmic level of dealing with shutting a business like that down. But there are going to be those businesses that shut down. Available capital is going to be very stiff. Investment capital into entertainment enterprises and entertainment businesses, event businesses, capital that's going to go to creating new events, that's going to be conservative and cautious when it comes back out. It's going to take a period of months to years for them to get back to the point where they're comfortable letting companies borrow to do things. So that's going to factor on things. And then I think the other thing is, look, right now today, there are 17 million unemployed people in the United States. Those people do not have discretionary income. And on the other side of it, there's going to be a shadow of time that it's going to take for those people to find new jobs, because some of them are not going to have jobs to go back to retrain, or just to get back to work and then get enough reserves that they can get back out. So we need to look at that realistically, but it doesn't mean that there's not opportunity. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to need to be entertained. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to be able to or want to communicate. And we are the channels for that communication. We are the channels for that entertainment. So what we have to do is pivot right next to our clients and do what we've always done, which is answer interesting questions and help them solve problems. And it may look really possibly uncomfortably different than how we used to do it, but that doesn't mean that we can't figure out new ways to do it. How might we put a play on Zoom? How might we get together small music festivals that happen largely digitally for the next 12 months? And then
Tim Wiley was just asking, will we be seeing virtual concerts? And I think that is what plays into it.
Yeah, I think we will be seeing virtual concerts. And I think in particular, look, we already are, right? Like you can see a lot of these artists from their home playing, which is a form of that, and it's the seed of that. That period of time I talked about when small groups are going to be able to get back together again, which I think will be within 2020, that's when you're going to be able to start to bring technicians together in a room with a band or with a performing artist and put together production that can be streamed. And that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen within this year. I think that I think that the bellwether for that is to look at how broadcast comes back. Because when the people can start making films and television shows again, the people can also start making streamed concerts. And that'll be, I think, the first moment of the entertainment events industry breaking loose and getting back to work.
Speaking of that, it's been interesting because there's been a few artists that have been doing acoustic sets, from like their living room to kind of keep the fan engagement going and keep that sense of community. And that's been really interesting because in some ways it almost provides a more intimate kind of a more intimate setting, in a more, let's just call it like human-like setting, where they're playing from their own living room or they're speaking to people from different areas within the confinements of their living spaces. And that's been really interesting to see as well.
I don't think that's going to stop either. I think even when we get back to gathering,
I hope not.
I think a lot of recording artists are twigging to something that. Are you familiar with Amanda Palmer at all?
No, not that one.
She's a singer-songwriter. She's married to Neil Gaiman, who is an incredible author. And Amanda's an amazing artist, and she gave a prescient TED Talk that I was so lucky to be in the room for. This was back when I was working as a designer on the TED conference. And she gave a TED Talk, I think in 2012, that was about artists surviving through building community. And I think that this is what is happening right now. There are artists who are actually reigniting their fan bases by doing these shows. And they're creating opportunities to create these incredible, engaged communities. And what Amanda Palmer did is she steadily drips this stuff. She records songs. She creates little pieces of artwork. She has these little streams. She's actually been doing it for years. And she ties all this to a community that's built around a Patreon site for her. And she, without touring and without ever releasing music in a conventional way, makes a living as a recording artist and has been for years. And I think her model is about to become a model that a lot of musicians and recording artists are going to lean into. Because look, here's a cold business calculation. The events that come back first are going to be the events that drive revenue. So look to pro sports, look at the music industry. These are the places where the events actually drive the cash, right?
And we were talking about eSports earlier as well, like the how eSports is thriving right now. And I think just from the viewer perspective, I'm sure, some of us that really enjoy video games have been really banging up our gaming skills as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, I'm not going to confirm or deny that I re-upped my subscription to World of Warcraft. I'm not going to comment on that. But eSports is a great place to look. And eSports has always been a hybrid of a live event with a virtual event wrapper. And it's arguable that the virtual event wrapper is the way more important part of esports, and everything about esports is digitally participatory. Yes, they've gotten big crowds together in stadiums to watch final matches, but esports fundamentally has been built for the stream. And we've been super lucky. Like, we've worked with Activision for years on esports events, and we've been fortunate to work with EA Sports as well and with some of the other big publishers. And it's that knowledge that right now we're leaning into in terms of how we're advising our other clients about what that looks like and how that can be successful and how that can drive revenue.
I'd actually love to hear from the audience as well, some of their thoughts on some of the topics and some of the things we've been talking about today. It'd be great if you guys had any questions, if you guys wanted to bring up any topics that you might want to talk about as well. So we'd love to hear back from you guys. And thank you actually for tuning in and being part of this as well today.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what Danny has to say about like that game show, and talking about game shows. And I think that one of the ways that we're going to be able to, as designers and creatives, to take virtual events and create that community and that interaction is to gamify things a little bit, to bring activities and possibilities for people in virtual events to collaborate, to work together for the purposes of fun, for the purposes of learning, for the purposes of creating an interactive loop where you give feedback and receive information. I think that's going to be a key differentiator. if you're in the world of experiential events, this is what you should be focusing on, because we already know how to stream. What we have to figure out and what we have to package into it is this ability for interaction and sort of consensual action, like people working together and experiencing together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny was asking, how will the future look for amusement parks and crowd experiences, which is that's a tough one.
Gosh, that's a tough one. And Dan, always Dan asks questions all the time. Full disclosure, I know Dan. Hi, Dan. Gosh, what's the future look like for amusement parks and crowd experiences? Look, there's another side. There's another side where there's a vaccine. There's another side where we're going to gather. As long as we have ever existed, from the point when we got together around fires on the savannah, we have wanted to experience stories together. We have wanted to experience myth together. We've wanted to be part of larger things. Are theme parks coming back? Yes, they are. Will crowd experiences come back? Absolutely, positively. Is there going to be an uptake curve to that? Yes. And I think, again, if we look back for examples, the most recent of which is after the recession of 2008, the general business consensus is that the experiential entertainment and the experiential marketing industries, that is, the industries of people gathering for purpose, it took about 5 years for that event to be recovered from, to get back to the extent it was before that event began. Now, I think we're going to see maybe that time compressed a little because the world is bigger, the needs are bigger, the economies are bigger. You're going to see companies like Disney working very aggressively to make it safe, to make it manageable, and to make it culturally attractive, because that's the other X factor. Are people going to be freaked out on the other side of this? Are certain parts of the marketplace going to be conservative about, I don't know about being around people? I think
even culturally, there's that cultural divide now as well. You're already starting to see it even in public spaces in the United States about this cultural divide. And that makes things quite tricky as well coming back into it.
Right. It really does. So what all that points to is not an apocalypse. Like, we're not at the end. We're at a change. And I think a lot of us,
we're almost at a new beginning in some ways.
Well, you've really hit on something there, because I think a lot of the uncertainty and even grief and anxiety people are feeling right now is actually, it's grief manifesting. The old way of being is done. The old way we existed in the world is over, and there's going to be a new way now. And that's a really uncomfortable thing to move into. It's hard, it's not easy, and it's okay that people are feeling anxious about it. It's okay that you're feeling uncertain. You should, this is natural, but there is going to be a new thing. I am I'll just say it out loud. I'm a giant fan of Disney. I've done a lot of work with Disney. You can absolutely count on the fact that Disney's going to crack the code to getting back to a model of people enjoying themed events. Absolutely. I think that
we were talking about this even before about, how the immersive event, basically before the change happened, the immersive event markets were starting to grow substantially. Yes. And you were starting to see smaller, more engaging activations by these different branded companies and agencies, and creating these kind of more small, intimate engagements, but maybe dispersing them on a scale so that you can kind of move from one experience into another experience. And I think we're probably going to see a lot more of that as well, change and evolve, and basically have more of these kind of little niche immersive experiences where audiences can still come together, but maybe not on as large a scale.
Right. I think you're exactly right, Jeff. Oh my God, I think that's incredibly insightful. And I think Rick Smith just commented that AI and 5G will determine much of this. And
I don't know, though. 5G might be the whole reason for COVID.
Okay. Can we pause for a moment? Listen, everybody who thinks that 5G is
technology background, I had to.
I have some news for you. The routers in your house that you've been using for the last 5 years for your wireless internet in your home have been using 5G the whole time. 5G does not cause coronavirus. Stop burning down telephone poles. I want the connectivity. Stop. I think you're right, Jeff. I think what you said about distribution of these events and smaller scale events, I think this is going to be the rich and fertile soil that we're going to see the comeback. It's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, and it'll be a little bit of a different curve for the big events, like the things like the theme parks, like Disney, big festivals like Coachella. They have a different set of challenges that they're going to meet in a different way. But I think the first thing we're going to see is more distributed, localized, smaller scale events that are more manageable in terms of managing safety and PPE and making sure that people can get together and be there in a safe way. But they're also going to be, I think, incredibly beautiful and compelling things, because people are going to be able to put the budgets that they used to have to put into logistics and things like porta potties and security barriers into creating richer, cooler, better events. And I think we're going to see that. I think that'll be the first place.
Different companies together as well. Like we're going to be able to pull together some of these other agencies and smaller agencies and be a lot more collaborative as a community and working on these different activations and these different experiences.
I like what Tom Peters has to say about will Unity developers be the new event planners? And I'm here to say they will be among the new event planners for sure. I was having a discussion yesterday with a top agency person, and we were talking about massive multiplayer online games. And I said, well, shouldn't there be massive multi-participant online events? So we're already seeing game engines leaking into live entertainment. Already people are using Unreal Engine instead of or in addition to media servers to serve content, to create extended environments in XD. I know that Birdo and Tupac probably talked way more intelligently about that stuff because that's what they do. When I talk to those guys all the time, I think there's definitely going to be a version of virtual events that is that. It's like massive multi-participant online events. It's going to happen through things like Unity and Unreal. I was telling people before the pandemic ever started, when I was talking to students, and they said, what do you think would be the best possible software thing for me to learn as a person interested in entertainment? And I said, gaming engines. No question about it. Right now, behind me, the thing I do most often when because I'm using my time like many people to learn new skills, is I am steadily working my way through the path of Unreal virtual production models, working with Unreal. And there are people doing incredible stuff in Unity too.
Absolutely. I mean, actually, touching on that, Facebook, for example, has this project called Project Horizon.
Yes.
And that is supposed to be a multi-person virtual environment, basically like bringing SimCity to life, or the old AIM chat, basically that whole AIM world.
Well, that's exactly the case. And I think as a culture, we were headed towards that already. Like there's a certain part of the human civilization that actually prefers and likes to connect digitally, but in groups and in gatherings. We saw it in Second Life. You see it in massive multiplayer online games. And I think that these circumstances are accelerating and exploding the growth of that. So I think absolutely. And the other day, my partner Butch Allen was having a conversation from 6 feet away with Tamlin from Silent House. And Tamlin was talking to Butch about how everybody on the broadcast side is leaning incredibly heavily into Unreal right now, because TV shows, things like award shows and game shows are going to come back, but they'll come back in the beginning without studio audiences. And when you don't have studio audiences, you don't necessarily need real sets.
No, it's not. No, so I mean,
that side of the industry is already discussing coming back virtually first and that what that looks like is designers like Tamerlan and like Corey and like Butch and like the people that already design stuff for television. They're all going to be designing stuff in Unreal for a little while, and maybe in some cases in a persistent fashion.
Yeah, it's funny how we've been seeing these trends kind of coming forward over the course of the last few years. And then it takes something like this to basically really instill the momentum, like instant momentum in pushing all of these different things forward. So the influx of people learning how to use Unreal and Unity, I think I've been there for the course of the last few years, but now they're really starting to become much more evident. And I think because there's much more practical uses for their applications now in today's environments, in today's setting.
Absolutely. I think if you're a production designer or an aspiring production designer who's at that Rubicon where you're about to come out of college, or you're in college, or you're at the beginning of your career, the absolute best thing you could do for yourself right now in terms of having a firm grip on a tool is having a firm grip on gaming engines, because that's a whole new sector of entertainment that we're watching being born right now, is those engines being bent to the use of events, extended reality, merged reality, virtual events. There's, I think that Epic Games probably got taken by surprise in the beginning, but now they've really responded to it. They've made Unreal like a go-to tool for architects, a go-to tool for broadcasters, a go-to tool for at least pre-visualization of live things, and also, for merged reality applications. So if you could learn one thing right now, I would absolutely be picking a gaming engine and learning as much as I can about that, because that gaming engine is not replacing, but it is operating alongside of media servers, CAD packages, 3D software packages. It's kind of this magical nexus of all those things. So
yeah, I'm pulling a whole bunch of those all together. I know from my experiences in working with a number of different media server companies now, really focusing on a lot of those technologies and being able to figure out interesting and creative ways to be able to mold those and pull those engines together. That was one of the main works that I was doing while working for Real Motion, was trying to figure out how to create this environment that can collaborate with all of these and communicate with all of these different technologies and engines available, and basically composite them in a real-time space. And more and more, that is the necessities for that are becoming more and more applicable by the second today.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and it is really a time for looking at those new tools, spending some time getting a grip on those new tools, but also looking at new ways of being together and presenting. And one of the things we're not thinking about is what I'm most curious about right now. Like, we've been discussing all the things that have been occurring to people, and I don't know the answer to what the question I'm posing right now, but where I'm focusing as a creator, because I create, and in a way, I don't care if I do it on a stage that exists in an arena or a stage that it exists in a gaming engine. I like connecting people to stories, songs, communication, and learning. And so as a creator, I'm like, okay, if that was the modality before, what might the modality be now? I'm not thinking, oh, my career is over because we're not going to gather in rooms. Instead, I'm like, okay, what does the room look like now? So
I was talking actually to, again, I have a good friend here named David Perkins who's been working on a new visualizer. And we were talking about the state of the lighting industry and especially lighting manufacturers. And I said, you know what, like as a lighting manufacturer, it would be an interesting case study and an interesting project to virtualize all those lighting fixtures, so that they can just automatically, maybe you could use them as a package so they could be dumped into these different engines and used in a virtual fashion.
I think that has to be an inevitability. So all of you out there, and I know you all, you're all my friends, you all figured out how to get your fixtures into Vectorworks. You all figured out how to make them into 3D icons that we could use in various previs environments. So for the love of God, will you figure out how to put them into the gaming engines? Because I got to tell you, the gaming engines, like the latest release of Unreal, two of its biggest new features were an ability to input and output DMX and time code. This is on purpose. So they're ready for you. You go be ready for them, because I want to be using my favorite Ayrton fixtures and Martin fixtures and GLP fixtures and all of you, because I love all of you. I want to be able to use your fixtures in merged events, because I'm going to have events that are going to exist in the digital and the real, and I want to have the same tools available to both audiences.
Absolutely. So I just want to take a moment as well and engage on some of the comments that we've had inside of the post from our audience. Kyle absolutely missed the circle bar. I think we're all going to miss that. AJ, as far as your news post, it said Reno 911 deputies are attempting daily Zoom briefings. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening for sure. It'd be interesting to get a little bit more context on that, on how they're doing it and what they're doing to be able to create those multi-person environments where they're just straight up using Zoom for those briefings. But that's kind of an interesting topic as well. You know, like the security measures that have to go into place for some of these virtual settings, especially the services that are life depending, you know, and now going into virtual settings and virtual environments, there definitely has to be some sort of security measures as well that have to be compensated for, I'm sure, on the back end of all of this, because right now it's kind of like the wild west in streaming, you know, like there's a lot of information, and I'm sure there's a lot of classified information that might not be being processed or passed through appropriate measures right now. So do you have any thoughts on like just ideas for security and security measures?
Well, it's going to be critical, like the clients that we're talking to about virtual events, that's like item number one, you know, is can it be secure? The answer is of course. And I mean, security exists in varying levels. You know, I know a lot of people have been freaking out about Zoom security. Well, my answer to most of your concerns is, guess what? There are administrative tools you can use to make sure you don't get Zoom bombed. By all means, make sure you password protect your Zoom meetings. Make sure you do unique Zoom meeting identifiers. Make sure you use the waiting room so you can pick who comes into your thing, or you can take care to make sure that only the invited people are. And for the love of God, make sure that you turn off people's independent ability to screen share or turn on their mic and you moderate. This is what you have to do, right? Because otherwise,
it's common sense, people. It's common sense.
Well, it's not common sense, because where Zoom failed is not in immediately making that apparent and communicating those kind of things to people.
It's education.
You know, but you're right. But Zoom, for instance, does have a persistent issue because it was built to be really easy to use. And so for it to be really easy to use, they had to build it around an engine that innately cannot be encrypted from end to end. So Zoom, for instance, if you're putting on an event for a defense contractor, or you're putting on an event for a big Fortune 50 brand that requires absolute security for all their channels, Zoom's not going to be one of your tools. The good news is that there are plenty of tools that have end-to-end encryption and good security. And here's the thing. In the same way that we learned to have relationships and to know enough about things like networking to make our entertainment stuff work well together, or about any of the tools we've used, now as creatives, producers, and designers, it is incumbent on us to help our clients find tools that work for them at this time. So the good news is you should know those tools exist. The bad news, or the other news, is that now's the time you should be educating yourself about things like security with digital interaction and figuring out what you're going to be offering or advising your clients to do. So,
absolutely, and I think that's one of the main key points and services that anybody can offer is, you know, we're all very, very knowledgeable in different things, and, you know, really brushing up on those skills and doing your research right now, I think is extremely important for coming out on the other side of this whole thing. So Bob, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for joining me today. I think the conversation was absolutely fantastic. I hope all the viewers that have joined us today have been able to at least pull something out of the conversation that we've been having today. And yeah, I just really wanted to thank you for being here. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. I hope you guys really enjoyed the session, and I look forward to continuing the conversation and continuing these conversations. So please, everybody, tune back in again next week, next Thursday, 1 p.m., back for Ahead of the Curve. I'm going to be bringing on Lewis Kyle White as the guest speaker next week, and we're going to be touching on different patches, and we're going to be touching on some hardware stuff and some control and some other elements like that. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you for doing this. I think that one of the best things that's coming out of the current circumstances is how many great minds I'm seeing come together, work together, and just how much contact there is among our industry. So I'm talking to my colleagues. I'm talking to people who, on the surface, you might look at and say, well, Bob, those are your competitors. But none of that matters right now. What matters now is that we continue to connect, we continue to build, we continue to inspire people, and we continue to be able to offer our clients an ability to solve interesting questions and to tackle problems that they didn't know that they were going to have. This is what we're good at. It's still what we're good at. Keep doing it. Be comfortable with the discomfort and get out there and keep doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. And everybody, I have to do it. My tagline, stay ahead of the curve.
Excellent.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.